Hello everyone, welcome to Wind Down Wednesdays. I'm your host Paula Taylor and this is episode 188. So we're taking a little bit of a break from our series. We've done two in this series of what I'm thinking of as kind of discussing muddy energies, muddy frequencies. And I mentioned in last week's show there is a reason we're talking about this, and this is leading into integration. So today we're going to talk about integration and the 5D, and I'm going to talk a little bit about like why I've been talking about these darker, denser, muddier, whatever word you want to use. I'm going to stick with muddier frequencies and how that relates to integration, because we don't ever talk about things in a vacuum, just like we don't live in a vacuum. There's usually, we're headed in a direction, or there's a reason things are coming through. There's a reason things are coming up at a certain time. And I just want to briefly say, there will be a show, What's the Deal with Energy Vampires? That's actually what I had in mind for this week, but my guides told me to put that show off to next week so that I could kind of come in and talk about this integration. They're telling me the timing of this is important, and then we'll get back to, that's kind of, will be like the third installment in this like Muddy Frequencies series that I've been doing. But the reason I was talking about those is because we're being asked for so much right now. I'm just going to say that. We're being asked for a lot. And we are in this time, specifically right now, but this is the last 2 years, and it's going to go on for, I don't know how many more. I'm not sure I want to know the answer to that. But right now we're doing this thing where we've got a bunch of timelines that are like kind of coming together and converging, and then we're expanding back out. And I was talking in some of the recent TikToks about this Schumann resonance frequency, this idea of this sort of, we're being compressed and released. There's these like pulsing. It actually came to me as like a heartbeat yesterday when I was talking to a client about this. And this is being done for a specific purpose. And sometimes I call this trash compactor energy, but what's happening right now, it's like wringing out the washcloth. So if you're going to keep cleaning something, you've got to wring out the old dirty water, right? You've got to let go of the dirty water and kind of re-soak your wash rag in clean water. And so one of the reasons that these muddy frequencies that I'm talking about, these topics, is because they are coming up and we are being asked to make a decision about them. We are being asked if we want to release these frequencies individually, and then that is reflected back collectively. And the first thing I'm going to say is that this is a very individual journey. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, as I often do, to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, make it a little more concrete. You may have a different resonance around this than I do, and you are being asked to make decisions just as I am. Your decisions might be different. Your discernment might be different. Your level of tolerance for this muddiness might be different than mine. But I believe that everyone right now, as part of this collective like convergence and divergence, or contraction and expansion, whatever way you want to think about it, part of the convergence or the contraction is showing us frequencies that we get to choose whether to take with us into a more integrated state. And I think this is confusing for people sometimes, because there's this idea of like, well, if I'm integrating, then I should be accepting all of me. I should be accepting everything. And this is a very 5D topic. This is why I'm calling this integration and the 5D. And we talk frequently about how the 3D is kind of the all or nothing, black or white, yes or no sort of mindset. And the 5D consciousness is inclusive, it's expansive, it's also complex. So on the surface, it might be like, well, if I'm going to integrate, I've got to integrate all the different energies in my field. I've got to integrate all the different parts of me. And there is some truth to that. And there is more complexity. There is more nuance to that. And right before I got on, I was kind of thinking of like, what would be a good analogy for this in terms of talking about integration? And why am I going to tell you that there are some frequencies that you may not want to take with you into integration because they are no longer serving your highest and most benevolent good? That's the simplest energetic answer. And I will tell you what I thought of was the Brady Bunch. So the Brady Bunch was about this integrated family, right? These were there was a woman who had been married and she had 3 daughters, and there was a man who had been married and he had 3 sons, and they were both widowed because, of course, divorce was not a thing in the 60s and 70s when the show was originally on. And the man and the woman got married and they had to integrate their family. So anyone who's ever moved into a new space or moved in with a new person, part of integration is release. Part of integration is saying, okay, you have a couch and I have a couch. Which couch do we want to keep in our new space? Or do we want to get rid of both couches and invite a totally new couch that we've chosen together into the space? This is the nuance of this idea of integration is, yes, it is calling back these parts of yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in when I get into kind of some stories for illustration today. It's calling back these kind of maybe abandoned or separated or compartmentalized parts of yourself. And it's also recognizing that there are energies in your field, physically in your quantum field, that are no longer serving you if you want to truly move into integration. This old couch I inherited this old couch from my parents, and I've never really liked it. It's not that comfortable for me. I'm going to get a new couch, or I'm going to choose my partner's couch. That's kind of the analogy here, this idea of we're coming in with all these different parts of ourselves. We're talking about integrating within ourselves, and then this is reflected back collectively. This is a time to look at all of these different parts of yourself, all of these things that have been compartmentalized, literally, physically in your field. The way I visualized this the other day with a client was this idea of like having a pinball machine. If you look down at a pinball machine, there's all these little things in the pinball machine, the little circles and the bumpers and all these things, so that when the ball goes through, it's bouncing all around. Our fields are like that pinball machine. For a long time, we have been dealing with ancestral patterns and traumas and past life patterns and traumas and karmic patterns and traumas, not to mention the stuff we have in this life for this personality self. That is a ton of different energy, and it gets sort of split out, compartmentalized in our field, and it is disrupting our coherence. I was going to do integration and coherence, and I realized that would be way too long of an episode. So we're going to talk about coherence in the 5D coming up, maybe in 2 episodes, whenever that comes in. We're going to start by talking about integration, because there's some nuance in here. There's some complex ideas. There's some things that I think feel triggering to people. And I understand why. Because one of the parts of our healing journey, of our integration journey, is accepting the parts of ourselves. But that also doesn't mean that we never release anything. That's part of the nuance there too. So as we are, I was thinking of them as like little bubbles. As we pop these little bubbles of compartmentalized energy, whatever that is, whether it's ancestral energy, whether it's an energy that was sort of foisted on you against your will, because at a certain point, we all come into this world fairly defenseless, and so energies can get in. I talked a little bit about that last week, the different types of energies. We talked about trickster energy and lizard energy, and some of this is just energy that's no longer serving our highest and most benevolent good. And I've been doing that work for years and years and years. Of the work that I do with energy is nuanced. Sometimes we're releasing energy, sometimes we're disinviting energy, sometimes we're reintegrating energy and inviting it back in. A lot of times it's a combination of all of those things, and sometimes even other things. And as we are going through this series of tunnels energetically together, is the way that I think of it, these timelines are coming together and collapsing. And when that happens, if you have been exploring expansion and you've been feeling pretty clear, light, harmonious, expanded, when these denser energies come back in, it can be very jarring, and it can feel a little bit like, well, I thought I already worked through that. This happens a lot in this spiral staircase of a journey. And then there is an invitation there to look at this denser energy, this muddier energy, these less clear frequencies, and decide, oh, I'm not sure that I really want that in my field anymore. And I'm going to find the places that it still exists, and I'm going to release it in some way. And then I'm going to reintegrate those parts of myself that were maybe split off because of that other energy. And this is, again, this sounds very abstract and esoteric, so I'm going to get into a couple different stories to talk about this in a few different ways. And I'm going to go a little bit chronologically, things I'm like, what is time? I say that a lot, but this last week, this last month, this last 2 months, it feels like the beginning of May was 5 years ago, and I'm recording this on May 29th, 2025. And I went to Mexico with my mom and my sisters at the beginning of May, and that feels like it really does feel like it was 5 years ago. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about something that happened then, but I'm going to actually talk about something chronologically that happened later, closer to the present, because I want to try to make this make sense. I don't think I even needed to go into that. That was a little over-explaining, but that's okay. So I've been working with this inner child version of myself for probably almost 2 years now, at least a year, and definitely very intensely since January of this year. So about 5 months at this point. And this is a version of myself, and I've talked about her, I think, on the show before. She's like about 4 years old. She's very sassy. She knows exactly who she is. She wants to be a singer. She wants to go on Star Search. She wants a room full of My Little Ponies. Like, she's very opinionated, and she's not very patient. And this actually comes into this story that I'm going to tell. So for the last month or so, since January, but I've been trying to get her to reintegrate. So this is a good example of one of these things that's compartmentalized in my field. So when I recognized that this inner child version of me had some special needs that I didn't necessarily share as an adult, but that were necessary to kind of help with healing and integration, I did this knowingly. I created a space in my quantum field for her where she would feel safe, where she would feel supported, where she could work through some of the things that she was feeling unsafe about, so that I could find more safety in my own nervous system, so that I could find more healing as an adult by supporting my inner child. And so this was maybe a year and a half ago or so, or even maybe 2 years ago, I created a special room for her in my quantum field. And here's the interesting thing. When you work in the quantum field, you are still working in physical reality. It's a reality that you can't necessarily see. Some of us can, but it's a physical reality. It's a vibration of energy that's a physical reality. It's just not vibrating in dense enough to have physical matter. So it's not something you can see, but it absolutely creates something in your field. So when I created this bedroom, this special bedroom for my child self in my field, there is actually a pocket of energy somewhere in my quantum field that is holding this space. And so it is not integrated fully with the rest of my field. And in this case, I did this on purpose, because sometimes this is part of our healing work, is that we need to create kind of a cocoon for especially younger versions of ourselves in order to bring safety into the nervous system. So I created this bedroom for her that was full of My Little Ponies, because she was obsessed with My Little Ponies and never really got to have many. I think I maybe had one, but she wanted the castle, she wanted all this stuff. And the great thing about working in the quantum field is that you can give whoever you're working with, whether it's past life self, ancestor, child version, whatever it is, you can give them anything they want in the quantum field. It's not physical reality. So in physical reality, we couldn't afford a lot of My Little Pony stuff. It was expensive. In the quantum field, she can have anything she wants. She can have as many My Little Ponies as she wants. So she's got this bedroom full of My Little Pony stuff. She had Archangel Michael hanging out with her for a long time, and she was pretty happy. And when I started doing some work around allowing myself to be seen more, this Claim your light and let it shine. That's my business motto, and I'm always doing that work. But this year, at the beginning of this year, I set this intention to step into my power and to reclaim my power and to allow myself to be seen and to let go of the things that were getting in the way of that. And so she started coming back up because she felt very powerful in a lot of ways and sort of very powerless in others. And I think, again, this gets to kind of like this nuance of this understanding that things are not all one way or all another way. There's a lot of complexity to all of these situations, to our personality at any age. So in the last month or so, I've been working to invite her to reintegrate into my field, to kind of let go of this cocoon of safety and to find safety within my adult body, within my adult space. And she was not having it. She was not having it. She would kind of come in briefly and be like, ew, I don't like it in here. And then she would leave. And there's a lot of, again, nuance around this. She, for the first maybe almost 10 years of my life or so, I did not feel gendered. And sometimes she comes through, she was a tomboy, what we call a tomboy, but sometimes she comes through as like just feeling like a little boy, or feeling neutral is more, it's closer to neutral. And so when I invite her to come back into my adult woman body, she doesn't like that. She's like, ew, it's all soft in here. I don't like this. She doesn't like the fact that I am a much more patient person than she is, because I've worked on increasing my patience for 40 years now. And so there were things about the space as we were trying to integrate, if you can think back to the Brady Bunch or just sort of like moving in with someone, you know, there are things that the other person has that you don't necessarily like, and there are things that you have that the other person doesn't necessarily like. And if you're going to cohabitate, you've got to figure out how to compromise. You've got to figure out how to be in a space together. And so I was inviting her back in, and she would come in for a while and be like, no, thank you. And I had an experience of kind of fully integrating her just in the last couple weeks or so. And interestingly, it wasn't something that happened in like a single sort of session or a single vision session or meditation. It was sort of this, first of all, allowing her to have the right to leave. I didn't demand that she came in. I didn't demand that she stay when she came in and she's like, oh, I don't like it in here. You're too soft and you're too nice and you're too patient. Like, why aren't you making things happen? I would be like, all right, we'll go on back to your little cocoon of safety, and, you know, we'll just keep, it was like a negotiation. Because especially when we're doing nervous system healing, nervous system regulation, you can only go as fast as the slowest part of you. I remember when my friend Barbara first said that to me. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner who I've mentioned on the show before. That little part of me was like filled with rage because I've never liked waiting for things. It's just, maybe it's part of my neurodivergence, maybe it's just part of my personality. I've never been a super patient person, and it's something I've had to work to develop. It's a skill I've had to practice. And so the last thing I wanted to do was to force her into a situation where she didn't feel comfortable. That literally defeats the purpose of the work that I've been doing. And I've been working toward more integration because that is what we're being called into. Part of the 5D is taking all these discrete, separate parts of ourself, parts of our field, ancestral, past life, quantum origin, all of these things that have been separated out, and allowing them to serve in a more holistic way, allowing them to integrate into a much larger and more potent field. So if you think about, now I'm thinking of Transformers. I guess we're going to have an 70s and 80s day. So there used to be these toys called Transformers, and of course they made a bunch of movies like in the early 2000s or so, and they were these little sort of trucks and cars that turned into little guys or like robot guys. But there was also this thing where like they would all come together and make a gigantic guy. So if you think about, if you have all these transformers and they're all sort of separately trying to accomplish something, they don't have the potency, they don't have the power as the guy that comes together and is this huge, powerful guy. That is what we're being asked to do in our quantum field right now. Instead of having all these separate spaces that in the 3D, a lot of us didn't even have access to, we didn't have awareness around until these veils started thinning and we had more and more access to the spiritual realm. All of a sudden, people are starting to wake up. That's why we use the term awakening. They're starting to wake up to this idea that there's all these other parts of ourselves beyond what we can see and feel and touch. Ancestral lines of energy, which I call energetic, or that's a bloodline lineage, like physical DNA lineage, your ancestors, your physical ancestors, and what I call energetic lineage, which is your past lives. So your soul has incarnated as many different selves over the millennia, not all of them human selves. That's what I call quantum origin. So we are being asked now to integrate all of these separate little transformers into one big, huge, powerful, potent version of you. And I could get really into the weeds about sort of soul differentiation on all of this stuff. I actually drew someone a schematic yesterday trying to explain like how I understand my quantum origin as a seraphim, and then my soul differentiation, and then like other versions of myself, past life and quantum origin, and you can get very confusing. We don't need to go down that road right now. We might eventually. The important thing to understand here is that as we get squeezed with this energy, as we have this compressive energy come in, this is a call to release. And what we're being asked to release are the aspects of these compartmentalized energies that are no longer serving us, so that we can invite that integration back in, so that we can put our giant transformer together and be much more powerful and potent and ready to move into this 5D consciousness. So there's a couple different ways this has come in, and that was kind of the most concrete. That's sort of why I started there. But I want to tell you a little bit of a story about what happened when I went to Mexico almost a month ago now. I had this really intense experience of integration. And this is a good example of how this work increases our potency and how it's coming in new ways because we have more access to all of these like spiritual layers that many of us were not aware of in the past. So I woke up one morning when we were in Mexico and I had a terrible like kind of neck, upper back ache, pain, like tension. It was really bad. It's an area where I've struggled a lot with holding tension. And I thought, oh my gosh, I had a headache. I had kind of a tension headache. And I thought, I don't know that I'm going to even be able to get out of bed. I feel just awful. I don't know what to do. And so I started just practicing this meditation that I've practiced. And see, now I'm like, have I told this before? Maybe I have. That's all right. I'm not sure how far into the story I got if I have told it before. So I started practicing this adaptation I've created of Joe Dispenza meditation that he calls Blessing the Energy Centers. And he was working with the 7 main chakras. I'm working with extended chakras and a little bit of a different focus, just like it's a little nuance of a difference that has made a big difference in how this practice affects me personally. So I was also working with this idea of ease and this idea of acceptance and just being like, if I'm having pain, maybe there's nothing I can do to move the pain, but maybe I can soften around the pain. Maybe I can just get the energy to kind of move through the pain so that I can still function. And so I was doing this meditation or this guided kind of activation where I was like moving up through these chakras. And I could start to feel this energy that has been trapped in my body. And this is the interesting thing, because we've been talking about specific types of energy the last couple of weeks. Sometimes you don't need to know what the energy is. you just become aware this energy is not serving my highest good anymore. And I don't really want it. I don't really want this stuck energy in the back of my neck and upper back that keeps causing me to have pain and tension headaches and fascial restriction. And so I had this intention. I started like feeling this energy, and it was getting kind of more and more intense. But this practice that I was doing is meant to move energy kind of up. It's like a Kundalini awakening practice, essentially, where you're moving energy up from the base and up and out the head, and then you're taking this extra energy and you're sort of releasing it out into the quantum field. Sort of the opposite of releasing down into the earth. I think she's had enough of our shenanigans, and she doesn't necessarily want release all the time. So I like this idea of it's essentially like my dissipation through expansion meditation. It's a little bit of an adaptation of that, kind of combined with this focus that I got from this Joe Dispenza meditation. So as I'm moving this energy up, I start feeling this energy in the back of my body, my upper body, and I was like, ooh, I don't know what that is, but I don't want it anymore. I want this out of my system. I want to release this energy. And as a result of that focus, when I got up to the upper chakras, the quantum sort of space chakras, there's the soul star, which is kind of where your quantum origin, your soul lies. And then there's the stellar gate, which is where the celestial realm is. I had this really intense, powerful experience of integration. And I had this understanding that in order to fully integrate the parts of myself, I had to release the resistance to that. So a lot of this energy that's in our field, you can just think of it as resistance. And sometimes it's helpful to label it, and it's often helpful to understand where it came from so that you can figure out like what you need to do to release and integrate. But the idea is I freed up this energy, and some of the frequency of this was not something I wanted to keep in my system, and I let that go. I surrendered that. And but in doing so, I invited this integration because there was this space in my actual physical body that had been energetically like separated out. And I've talked about this before. At one point, I sort of visualized it as almost like a stingray shape. And I think I talked about it, this idea of having like an alien sort of stuck on the back of your body. And I was like, I don't want this here anymore. And I understand why it developed. It was like a defense mechanism. It was a protective mechanism where it was like, this energy is coming into my system and I don't know what to do with it, or I can't process it, or it's causing me nervous system dysregulation. I'm just going to shove it behind me. That's why I call that the back body in my book, because a lot of times it's like, I can't handle this right now. I'm just going to push it back. I'm going to push it down and I'm going to push it back. And this was like a bunch of stuff that had just gotten pushed back. And there was a lot of stuff in there too about this stuff I was doing with this inner child work, about being seen and being heard, being too loud, being too bossy, things like that had been kind of stuck in my throat and kind of pushed back into the space. So as I began moving this energy, first of all, the physical pain and discomfort I was having completely went away. And then the next thing I knew, I was in this state of total bliss. And I was up in that celestial realm, and I was feeling the Akash, which I've talked about a few times. It's not the Akashic records. The Akashic records are like how we access this energy of the Akash. The Akash is a yin energy. It's a dark energy. It's a very clear, very expanded, very harmonious energy. It's the energy that holds information. And it has a feminine kind of dark yin type energy. And then there is the realm of source, the angelic realm that I work with a lot, and that has more of kind of a masculine or a yang or a light energy. And as I was releasing this energy out of my body, kind of surrendering it up into this celestial space, I suddenly had this visceral experience of complete balance, this understanding, and I started seeing this infinity symbol, this like this Mobius continuum. So the infinity, if you see the infinity symbol in a 3D space, it's never ending, right? It sort of keeps going around and around. And I was seeing the information I was being given was that it was like an updated yin yang. So the yin and the yang, sort of the dark and the light. And this is like, in the yin yang symbol, there's actually a line kind of separating them. And I think it's supposed to be a representation of this flow. But I was seeing this and I was physically feeling this integration of this light and this dark, this feminine, this masculine. And all of a sudden, all these different quantum aspects of myself, quantum origins, past life origins, ancestral origins, began to come together, began to integrate. And instead of having this field where there were all these little bubbles or all these like little pinball kind of things, I like bubbles, kind of makes sense to me too. It was like all the bubbles kind of popped. And all of a sudden, I was just one energy. I was this energy of flow, because we are meant to be moving. We are meant to be in flow. We are meant to incorporate dark and light energy and yin and yang energy. And I was in a space of complete clarity, expansion, and harmony. My body felt totally different. I made a video on TikTok. I think this is why in my brain I'm like, I think I've talked about this before. And I remember saying something like, this might be the most important message that I've ever channeled. And I was still a little bit in an altered state for most of that day. These other versions of my soul that I've been working with, they're not me. Personality Paula me is the only differentiation that is unique that will ever exist. My soul has had many other differentiations. And the way I sort of think about that is like, if you think about a big light, like a chandelier, a big globe that has a bunch of like pendant lights coming off of it. So that's your soul. And then there's all these little pendant lights coming off of it. And these are past lives. These are parallel lives. These are quantum origin lives. So non-human origin lives. And there is a space to find integration with all of these versions of yourself by being in that expanded source space or that soul space. We can find this integration of our field. And what happens when we do that more and more, first of all, we have way more power physically, energetically. We have way more emotional capacity. So the things that trigger you begin to be less triggering. Doesn't mean we're never going to get to a point of no triggering, because we're in a body and we're dealing with chemicals and emotions and all of the things about being human. And the more capacity we have, the less things that used to trigger us. We might still get triggered, but instead of getting triggered at an 8, maybe we're triggered at a 2. Or maybe something that used to trigger you is no longer triggering at all. And along with that, your discernment begins to shift. And now that I'm talking about this, I realize that all of the stuff that has come out of all the episodes I've been doing, talking about the trickster energy, talking about lizard energy, this is all about discernment. The more you begin to experience integration, the more you understand what in your 3D physical reality is not aligned with that integration. And in the physical 3D reality, we are dealing with that flow. We can access that quantum flow, and we are in a physical 3D reality where there's all of these nuances, all of these shades of gray of different types of energy, and we get to decide if that serves our integration or not. And so since that time, I recognize now that my discernment has really shifted, and I am seeing these muddy frequencies, these denser frequencies a lot more. And I think that is intentional. I've been seeing it a lot more in the work I do with other people. I've been seeing it kind of coming at me, or the places that I've been experiencing this or holding this in my field, or, you know, where it was a lot of times some of these energies, you can go back and listen to the last couple episodes. This is energy that's sort of been foisted upon you, or like when I talked about trickster energy, there was a past life version of myself that engaged with that energy. Even though I'm a separate differentiation, there is bleed over. That is what karma is. That is what we're all connected to the same soul. So as somebody is working with an energy that's not clear, that's not harmonious and expanded, it sort of bleeds into the other kind of light bulbs, the other pendants of the bulb. And that's part of the karmic work we do, is deciding, is this energy something that I want to continue engaging with? And everybody gets to have their own answer about that. I'm not telling you there is a right or wrong answer. I am telling you about some of the muddier frequencies that I have chosen to disengage from, because I recognize they are not serving my greatest good, my highest good, my most benevolent good. And as I get into an integrated state, I also recognize that those energies don't exist in that space. Integration is about accessing this unconditional love space more and more. And at the very source, at the very quantum source of things, everything is all one energy. And just even differentiated slightly out from that, like in the seraphim space, there is differentiation. And differentiation means, yes, we have light, yes, we have dark. And in that entire celestial space, the energy is clear, harmonious, and expanded. And if we are moving back more toward that space, if we are trying to hold that energy in our physical space, in our physical bodies, in our quantum space, some of the denser energies that we encounter in this physical 3D reality just don't really have any place in that. They're not clear, they're muddy. They're not harmonious, they're disharmonious or discoherent. They're not expanded, they're contracted. And we can, at the same time, this is the interesting thing about the 5D, at the same time as I have been disengaging from and disinviting these energies, I am also releasing judgment of those energies. And that is one of the ways, that's actually one of the most powerful ways to disinvite, is there's like an old saying about, hate is the other side of love, and indifference is it's this neutrality. I no longer want these frequencies in my field. When I see them, I ask them to leave, or I disinvite them, or I strongly move them out of my field, or I just say there's no food for you here. There's nothing for you. I am not going to engage with this energy. And the energy, it wants something to engage with it. Muddy frequency, it wants to, you think about somebody like stirring the pot and always going around gossiping and kind of bad-mouthing people behind their backs. That's where we get that idea of stirring the pot. Muddy frequency seeks muddy frequency. So when muddy frequency shows up and it's like, sorry, this is a clear pond, there's no space for muddiness here, it just kind of moves on. And it has given me a lot more clarity about these frequencies. I see them more clearly, and I don't fear them because I just recognize it's a choice. I just choose not to engage with this muddy frequency anymore. It's simple, it's not always easy. It's simply a choice, and there is excavation work to be done around that, because when something comes in and you do get triggered, it's because there's something there to trigger. So as we disengage from these energies and we get more and more into this integration, we may find we have much more clarity, much more expansion, much more harmony, meaning we have more neutrality. We're not as triggered by things as we used to be. We're not as afraid of things as we used to be. And it's definitely a process. It's something that we'll probably talk about again. And the next step beyond this is this idea of coherence, of like sort of delving more into harmony and coherence in your physical body, especially. That'll be another whole show. I don't want to get into that today. So if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes and you've been a little bit like, ugh, this is taking a dark turn, this is not what she used to talk about, I want to address that just briefly, because these are some of the things, the triggers that came up for me personally. I almost did not release the What's the Deal with Lizard Energy publicly. I almost just left that private to the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary. It felt very vulnerable to release that. And there's a couple reasons why. I think I talked about it a little bit on that episode. There are nuances here, there are complexities here, again, that are sometimes difficult to discuss. And this is part of the 5D. We have to have these discussions. And sometimes we risk triggering each other or being triggered when we start talking about these things more plainly. So moving into the 5D is asking us for more clarity, expansion, and harmony than ever before. And as we get more clarity, think about, like, if I take my glasses off, I can't read my diplomas that are up on the wall, on this opposite wall. I know what they say because they're here every day. I need more clarity, and then I can say, oh, here we go. Paula Taylor, Heidi Wilson Fluid Healing. There's my craniosacral certificate that's on the wall. As we get more clarity, we are asked to practice more discernment. And as we are asked to clarify, expand, and find more harmony, we are starting to see these shadowy aspects more clearly than ever before. I mean, you don't have to look far collectively to see this stuff. There is a reason that all of this is happening right now, because collectively we are being asked, do you want to keep engaging with this money frequency? Do you want to keep engaging with trickster energy, with lizard energy, with the energy of energetic vampires, or sort of people using energy for food? We'll go into that in another episode. And only you know the answer to that. And if you find it very triggering, there's probably something there to look at. When things are very triggering, it's because, again, there's a reflection there. And a lot of us were raised with religious backgrounds, with, certain types of beliefs about certain things. In the spiritual community, there's a lot of this idea of, like, what you fear, you attract. So you better not fear anything. Or like what you focus on, you attract. So you better not focus on that. There's a very thin line there between truth and spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. If I don't admit that there are dense or muddy frequencies, that they exist, how can I choose to disengage from them if I won't even see them? If I take my glasses off and I can't read the things on the wall, I don't know what's up there. I have to put my glasses on. I have to see clearly, and then I can go, ooh, yeah, I don't think that's a thing that I want. I don't think I resonate with that. And maybe I see something, I say, that is something I really do resonate with. It is time to start asking ourselves really difficult questions. That is part of this spiritual journey. And there's a reason that part of this journey is called Dark Night of the Soul. When we start to uncover these little compartmentalized places in our frequency, in our field, they have been compartmentalized for a reason. I gave you an example of doing that on purpose. We do this all the time for protection, like the thing in my back. That was compartmentalized energy that I couldn't deal with, that felt painful, that felt scary, that felt contracted. When I went to release it, I didn't have to go back through every little thing and be like, oh, this is from this time that this happened, and this is from this time this happened. One of the reasons I love energy work, we don't always have to know exactly what we're releasing. Once we know that it's not resonant with us, that it's not serving our highest good, we get to move it through and out of the field. And as we've done that, then now I have the opportunity to integrate my shoulders and my neck in a new way. And it feels weird. It feels a little strange because that thing was there for so long. It's like if you've ever had something in a cast and then they take the cast off and all of a sudden you're like noodly, It's like there's an adjustment period in this integration as well. So we're talking about some of these muddier frequencies in service to this idea that we are headed toward more integration and more coherence. And as we do that difficult work within ourselves, dismantling our own bubbles, popping our own little bubbles and finding more integration, that can be reflected back collectively. And things are looking very dense and muddy collectively because it's really time to wake people up. It's really time in order to step into healing, you've got to get triggered. You've got to see the things that you don't like in order to decide what it is that does resonate. So if you are enjoying the show, if you would like to join us in our online community, the Spiritual Awakening Sanctuary, we'd love to have you there. Next week's show is actually coming directly from one of the members who kind of made a comment and gave me the idea to talk about that in a podcast. So there's a great place to interact with like-hearted individuals, to interact with me. You get some exclusive discounts. You get a weekly guided activation or meditation through the podcast, as well as bonus episodes of the podcast. Our quantum state is full integration, and we are always being called back to that. And it can feel a little bit dysregulating in the 3D to be called into something that is impossible to fully attain while we have a physical body. However, we can come closer to that. We can invite integration into different aspects of our field and remember what it feels like to be in that integrated state and begin reintroducing that into the physical body, into the nervous system, in increments, in steps that feel safe and supported. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a beautiful rest of your day or evening. I will see you on the next episode of Wind Down Wednesdays.